Hello and welcome back to the GorillaBiker, and today myself and Niall here are going to be riding home and we're going to be talking about our old bikes worth it. So we're just finished having coffee in our favourite coffee place over there called, well, my favourite. Is it your favourite? He prefers Boulevard and Clayton, but it's my personal favourite place to drink coffee from. Huh? Oh. But anyway, yeah, we're going to get on the road here and talk about old bikes and why they are or are not worth it. I fell down into the hole. Climbed up out of the hole. Let me know when you're ready, my friend. Alright, so for obvious reasons this video is based on the fact that I'm riding my 1990, this is technically on the frame 1997 Honda Valkyrie, but there's lots of parts on it and in it from a 1998, which we'll get to as part of this chat. We do have Niall on the line. Hello, Niall.
Hello.
So he phoned a friend, brought him on here, who wants to be a millionaire style, you know. But I suppose to get it out in the open.
Then your cat said.
Yeah, I like that. To get out in the open, yes, obviously I do think it is worth it, and we'll talk about the various reasons why. One of them kind of being cost, but you also, I mean, it's not worth it in a sense that you do have to do a lot more of the work yourself. I mean, this bike, I don't think anyone could have really afforded this bike if they were to give it to a garage to fix it for them. Like, Niall, I'll put it this way, Niall, would you have bought this bike when it was in its not running condition, say? No, so, you know, and that's, Niall is well able to use his mechanical appendages, but he rebuilt an old VW many years ago and is rightfully not interested in getting into another project, because I suppose that's the biggest downside to owning old bikes, is you are going to have to, you know, do things and then redo things and whatnot that otherwise you would not have to do on a more modern bike. Like, I recently rebuilt the forks on this, and then I had to rebuild the left fork because the parts that I used were not up to par. I had to pull the carbs in and out several times recently. Not because there was anything particularly wrong, but just because, like, there was seals that needed to be done, and then I forgot to do the air fuel mixture screw and stuff. So there's so many different little bits and pieces that you have to do on these older bikes that, like, if you even just delete the carbs from the equation and you have a modern EFI bike, you don't have to deal with literally any of that. And I suppose to kind of, you know, blend these two is Niall, for his CTX, probably paid, I'm going to say ballpark, very similar to what I paid to have this finished. If you were to look at the two, obviously it is personal preference. I think they're both really nice bikes. But with Niall's bike, you do get something that is considerably newer. So, like, all the other seals and stuff that I haven't even touched on this one, you know, they're that much newer on his bike. And you've had to do, like, service and maintenance wise, other than the radiator, you've just done an oil change. That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the benefit to buying something newer, obviously, is that you just get on it and you use it. Whereas, like, I mean, you can go look at the playlist for this bike. That is all the stuff that I have personally done to this bike, which is considerable. But yes, obviously, if you look at, like, brand new bikes, obviously Niall's is a 2014, right? Yeah, it has to be 2014. They only made them that year. His is a 2014. So I mean, by some people's standards, his bike is probably older too. To me, like, 10 years old is basically brand new. But I am on a bike that's nearly as old as me. One thing I do want to talk about, since we mentioned it, is that's one thing, like, with these older bikes, you know, it now obviously depends on the parts, but for instance, Niall had a stone or something jump up and damage his radiator, and he was able to get it repaired, but a brand new one was like $800, wasn't it?
Yeah. So crazy money.
Absolutely crazy. But, like, the parts were available, sure. But, I mean, no one wants to pay for that.
Well, I suppose it's the fact that it's a 1 year only bike as well.
Yeah, those true, very true. Now that said, when I looked at the gold wings and stuff, the gold wings were just as expensive.
I can imagine they wouldn't be that complicated that they'd be that expensive.
I know. Kind of what leads me on to this one is I did look for these, and like there's so many aftermarket options for something like that just because they've been around so long, and it's, you know, heavily based on the gold wing. So, you know, GL 1500s of the time are well supported. There are obviously certain things on this bike that are not the same, and they're not as well supported because it's not a gold wing. It's something a little more rare. But you know, that is something to I suppose bear in mind. We're going left up here at the stop sign. Is, you know, older bikes, parts are cheaper, but there's also generally like if you have a part that's really cheap, it's probably because it breaks a lot. And there's lots of it. Whereas if you look at, for instance, Niall with the radiator, it's probably fairly rare that those radiators get hit by a stone in such a way that they puncture them, which is, I'm sure, part of the reason why they're expensive. Another thing that is interesting, if you know you've been following along, I suppose, with EICMA, Motorcycle Live and all those, is how technological newer bikes are becoming. Now that's, for me, not a problem. I think it's cool, but for fixing them, it's going to be a problem. Like, there's nothing on this bike other than the ECU, which is actually the reason why, and we'll get to that in a second, that I went and bought a second parts bike, because to buy a working ECU was as expensive pretty much as just buying a parts bike. So you get all the other parts around it, just buy a parts bike. But that's definitely, you know, something that could be a little bit more of an issue. But if you look at that, that's one electrical component, whereas all these newer bikes, if any of those electronics start going bad and you have to replace multiples of them, that could get very, very expensive. Not only that, but it just makes it harder to repair yourself. And there's also the rumours, which I personally don't believe, but there's rumours of like eventually being able to like block people to the actual speed limit on a road and whatnot. Which, of course, me and Niall never speed. We are law-abiding citizens. But it's nice to have the option, you know? Niall, would you buy a vehicle or a bike that would automatically limit your speed?
Wouldn't be my first choice. But if it's going that way, we probably have no option.
Well, yeah, at some point they might ban things, but that's where it comes into, like, is it worth just having, you know, an older vehicle like this? Because while technically, yes, you can limit carbs, it's also very easy to delimit carbs.
Yep.
And you don't want, you know, regulation bodies to be able to stop you doing fast stuff. Then, you know, an older bike is also very worth it. Niall, what are the reasons do you have any questions for me, I suppose, around why I would or would not like an older bike?
No, I would like an older bike too. And you mentioned that, you know, I did up an old Volkswagen. And I think if I was to take on another project, it would be a bike. I think it would be a bike. I don't have the desire to take on another car or camper project.
Yeah.
But if it was a bike, it might be definitely something I'd be interested in. Maybe not right now because I don't really have all the tools in the garage here.
I do.
Yeah, just at the moment it just doesn't suit me, I don't think. But at some stage I'd like to take on a bike project, like an older bike.
And that's interesting because I agree with you. Now, I like in the past I've worked a lot on cars. I don't know, does anyone watching know that? But I used to work a lot on cars, and it's just I think it's a kind of a scale thing. Is cars are just, they're so much more hassle when you need to get and do something, just because they're bigger and they're heavier and everything is bigger and heavier. Whereas with bikes, like this was the biggest bike I've ever worked on, and it wasn't bad. Like there was one or two things that were slightly more awkward, but overall, like really, really not bad. Now I will say though, as the Niall just brought up a very actually important point there, is that tools, like you know, you can do a lot of stuff with a basic tool set, but this does need this bike on its own needed a particular fancy tool for the left fork to disassemble it. We're going left here now, and you know, even just to get the rear tire off to do it, that was a bit of a pain. Not that you needed particularly special tools or anything, just that you needed something that had lifted high enough so you could drop the swing arm, and or you have to take the entire exhaust system off, which I don't think anyone would ever want to do. So there are definitely, you know, bits and pieces that you need to keep an eye on there, in that, you know, if you're going to work on an old bike, don't just look at the cost of the bike and the parts, it's also the tools. That's a very valid point, one that I actually forget a lot. But yeah, it's a huge part of the expense, but at the same time you do get to actually, you know, learn something, build the skills to work on these things yourself, which, I mean, personally I think is worthwhile, because I'm probably never going to stop working on older bikes, or older vehicles in general, but definitely older bikes. So getting the tools and getting the knowledge to do it is worthwhile. You know, it's not just the cost of all the bike itself and all the parts, it's also tools and just time. Like, you know, knowledge, you have to build knowledge to do these things in time. And none of it's hard. Like, nothing on this bike rebuild wise was difficult. Some of it was just time, and you're gonna like I said, you're gonna have to do things, you know, 2, 3, 4 times sometimes to get it right, just to be prepared for that. And, you know, if there's like an untested part, you know, you rebuild around, and then you think that you're golden, you put it all back together, only to realize that, you know, the seals might have been good now and all that stuff might have been good, but actually the original part had failed way back when, and now you need a new one. So, you know, that's kind of what happened to me on the first Valkyrie, is that I found out the ECU was bad after I got the engine turning over and I got the carbs rebuilt and everything else. But there's no way to really know that until you get to that point. So, you know, they're projects for a reason. You're not going to get them done instantly, so you do have to have a level of patience, you know, going into them, and it is worth it in the end, but you do have to be ready for that. We're going right here, I think, Niall. For anyone watching as well, I think I have finally gotten Kalimoto figured out. The last couple of spins now have been excellent, and I've put in, like on this one today, I think I've 13 VIA points, which is a little bit of work up front, but I mean, it still only takes me about 10 minutes, so it's well worth actually laying out your spin a bit, and then you get a really nice route. So I take back all the bad things I said. It's definitely working well now these days.
We should also mention that it's what date is it?
Oh yeah,
and it's 68 degrees. End of November.
Niall wants to mention it is currently the 24th of November, I think, and it's about 19 degrees Celsius, 20 degrees Celsius, or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It is, like, look at that sky, and it's November, end of November. This place is fake. Other things I do feel that I think need to be mentioned about old bikes, and again, going back to the very, very first thing I said, is I do personally think it's worthwhile rebuilding them and using them. But parts availability, there are some things that you just will not be able to get. Like, there are certain things that if they do fail, and they fail rarely, so there wasn't that many of them around, so a lot of them that are in the market are coming off parts bikes, so people kind of know their limited quantity. Like, there's pulse generators for this bike, the ECU for this bike, stuff like that. You know, you're going to be paying a premium for it, so that is one thing to just be aware of, that depending on the bike and depending on how many of them are made, you may end up paying a nice amount of money for some of the parts. But it is, you know, still worth it in my opinion, but you just have to be ready for that in your budget, you know. Fork seals and all them, they're always going to be available, honestly. You know, the basic maintenance stuff is pretty much always going to be available, but you do have to be prepared for when something bigger goes wrong. Like, if someone has 10 of them, the person who has 10 of them is going to be able to dictate the price. And as much as I personally don't like that, you know, there's nothing we can really do about it. So that is something to be aware of, is check how well supported your bike was day one. Like, if you buy an SV650, there's going to be parts for SV650s forever. And then there's the, you know, the big question is like, oh, what if they don't ride as good as modern bikes? And a lot of that back in the day was suspension technology and tire technology. So tire technology is easy, because you just buy new tires for your bike. Please, if you're rebuilding an old bike, please buy new tires. A lot of people don't, and then they blame Like you'll have a massive amount of handling issues and whatnot from old worn out tires or just hard tires, and you won't even realize it is the tires until, you know, it's maybe too late. But old tires play hell on a bike's handling. And with the suspension part of it, yes, suspension is obviously a huge thing to be aware of, but you can upgrade old suspension to more modern, like I've done on this bike, and now it rides much better. Still haven't upgraded the shocks. I probably will do that at some point.
So what other bike would you like to get? Older bike would you like to get and fix up?
There's a lot of bikes. Like I would love to rebuild a VMAX, like an older VMAX. I'd love to get a V65 Magna, but I think more realistic coming up soon bikes would be like an older Moto Guzzi California, or even like the old slabside, like not slabside, is it the slabside? The GSX-R 1100 sports bike, something like that. I'd love one of them. Just because largely, like, a lot of those bikes were way ahead of their time power wise and whatnot. Like, you can even see now we don't have stuff that's as powerful as like the 1100 in a lot of ways, because also those bikes had no restrictions. But the big fall down on those bikes was tires and suspension technology, and like we can fix that, you know what I mean, now, as well as brakes. Brakes are harder, but they're still very easy to, well, not very easy, they're easier to fix now. What about you? If you were to pick one, you know, older bike to restore, what would it be?
Well, do you remember we were talking on another video about me between the CTX and an ST1300?
Yes.
An ST1300 is in that age bracket now where it's, you know, it's old. If you were to get one, you'd literally be overhauling a lot of it.
Yeah, you'd need to.
But then I suppose I'd like you know, something older again, like a classic restoration maybe as well.
Well, if you ever want to do one, I always have space for a build on the channel. Someday. There's actually, I don't know, did I tell you, and I definitely didn't tell everyone on here, there's a friend of mine has a CB750 Nighthawk, like the one we had, and I'm probably going to restore it for him because he doesn't have the time to do it. And also, when I was doing the CB, a lot of the stuff I did was before I got time and tools and stuff to do it myself, so I didn't record a lot of them, a lot of the things I did. So that would be a chance as well to, you know, do a lot of that stuff. So that'll be an interesting one to do, because I liked working on that bike. It was easy. So yeah, to round it off, I suppose, do I think it's worth it to buy and restore an old bike? Yes. But I do think you pay for things in one of two ways, right? You pay for things in actual cash by buying a newer bike, or you pay for it in time and tools, as to Niall's point. There's no avoiding the tax, whatever way that's collected, whether it be emotional time tax or cash. You know, you can go buy a brand new bike from a showroom and almost certainly not have a problem with it for quite a long time, especially if it's a Japanese bike. They're extremely reliable, especially from the big four, you know. Whereas a lot of older bikes are also extremely reliable once you go through them, because especially looking at you know, older bikes that were popular like this one, because all the issues that they had are very well known and fixes exist for them. So, you know, it's not like you're going in blind. For instance, like older Suzukis, you know, older Hondas. Let's look at older Hondas. Like the stators are an issue on a lot of them. So a lot of people who tour on older Hondas just carry a spare stator. So, you know, that's the nice part about having older bikes too, is even though they do have issues, they're known and you can prepare for them or fix them if a fix exists. So, you know, there's that too. But yeah, I do think it's worth buying them. But you do have to be prepared to work on them, because, you know, they're gonna break. They're old. If you go through them once, like I did with this, they should last for a long time very well. But if you buy one and just want to fix it as stuff breaks, you're probably going to end up spending, you know, a lot of time fixing them. over a couple of years until you get everything right. Whereas this one took me like probably 4 months total to kind of fix everything on. Or you can go, if you want to save some cash and save quite a bit of time, you can go for something like Niall has, you know, a used bike, but one that isn't that old. So all the seals and all that stuff are still going to be good and healthy. So yeah, would you have anything to add to that, Niall?
I think you mentioned it earlier on, but I suppose starting price is a big thing. Like, so if I look at the ST1300s, for something with low enough mileage, you're still talking 4.5, 5 grand.
Yeah.
So that's a steep enough starting point for me anyway at the moment, because you're going to have to put in money. You're going to have to replace seals. You're going to have to replace the tires. You're going to have to go through it all. So I'd say it all depends on the starting price of the bike you're interested in.
Yeah, whereas like this one was what, 1,200, 1,500, whatever it was, to buy this second bike, which I think made sense, especially since I already had the parts bike. So it's a good point. Is, you know, you have to look at your initial starting price for the build you're going to buy, because then you need to look at the tools, the parts, and the time. You know, it's not a cheap process, but you know, it depends as well on if you really like the bike. You know, there's obviously the financial value part of it, but then there's also the, you know, if you just really love a particular bike, I think it's pretty much always going to be worth doing it. Like if I had always wanted to own a Valkyrie forever, for instance, I'd probably get this one painted and everything and have it just exactly how I want it, and then it's going to last forever. But that's a very fair point. But I don't think a lot of people will go for older bikes now, because obviously less people have space to work on stuff, less people have time and tools to work on stuff, and you know, people just don't want to work on stuff as much anymore as they used to. Whether that be because you used to you just had to, you didn't have the money to get newer stuff, whereas now, I mean, you can buy a bike on finance and stuff, so it's a lot of people just do that, and then they don't have to worry about working on it. So, you know, and that's, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, it's just not how I do it. So it depends on what you want to do yourself. But if you're asking me, is it worth it? Yes, it's absolutely worth it. Was the time and effort I put into this one, you know, am I enjoying riding it now? Yes. It's actually quite a nice bike to just get out and cruise on a somehow winter's day. So yeah, worth it. Niall, anything else?
Is it fair to say that less people are becoming mechanics these days?
Yes, definitely fair to say.
There's another reason, like there's less people passing down that knowledge to, you know, their kids who want to work on a project.
That's true. And actually, that reminds me, and I was speaking to Toaster just recently about it, is like, and I don't know why, like, I always have the garage door open and you can see people looking in and you can tell they're interested, but they never stop and ask, you know, what are you doing? No one will come in and have a chat about what you're doing. So, you know, that kind of secondary learning, like, not, you know, that I'm not actively trying to teach someone, but that system where you used to just drop in on your neighbour working on something or whatever, it's kind of gone, you know, over here anyway.
Everywhere, I'd say.
Well, probably everywhere, yeah. I think I've only ever shown my closer friends how to fix their bikes and whatnot, and I do think there's a bit of fear there as well, like that, you know, if you go working on something on bikes, obviously you have to be extra careful, because if you mess up a set of brakes or something, like, you could kill someone. So, you know, I do understand the reluctance for people to try learn as well, but a lot of this stuff can be tested quite easily, you know, before you go on longer, faster spins or whatever. It's just being careful. So it's worth learning as well, in my opinion. But yeah, that's another very good point around. Yeah, like, just less mechanics. Yeah, less people learning, whether it be intentional or not. It's just less. It's just happening. So yeah. But if you've watched this far and you've thought, oh, all these challenges that they have mentioned, and you still want to do it, then you're probably one of us. One of the kind of probably stranger in the head people who actually like spending a lot of time rebuilding something just because. Even though something much newer and probably more comfortable exists. You know, that's, I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with us, but I still think, personally, it's still worth doing it. So maybe that says more about me than anything else. We'll try getting Niall to buy that ST1300 and rebuild it, because I would love to rebuild one, to be honest. Love to get my greasy paws on one, and yeah. Huh?
Waiting a while.
Yeah, we'll be waiting a while, but that's okay. We don't mind waiting. And yeah, that's it. If you've watched, thank you very much for watching. As always, a very special thank you to all of my patrons. I do very much appreciate your support. And I think I've saved enough patron money now to do another parts purchase that some people have been asking for, so that'll be cool. More to come on that one. Niall, anything to add?
Nope.
That is it. If you've watched this far, please do maybe leave a comment or something. And if you liked the video, maybe leave a like on it, like an actual physical thumbs up. And yeah, until next time, that's it. That's a Mazda Miata. They're cool and I like them, but I don't fit in them. Thanks again, everyone. Adios. Outro crew. Do you like Mazda Miatas, or MX-5s as it's called in more civilized parts of the world? Let me know. I'd love one, but I don't fit in them, sadly, so I can't get one. Bye, outro crew.